5.3 earthquake hit last night in Soda Springs, Idaho. 5.3, very shallow. It was only 9.2 kilometers. But folks, since it happened last night, there has been an unbelievable situation develop. 54 aftershocks that are at least 2.5 or higher. Now, there's a bunch of them even lower than that. But let's just go with the ones 2.5 or higher on the U.S. Geological Survey. 54 of them, including a 4.1, a 4.2, a 4.3, and we just had another one, a 4.5, and that one was strong, okay? And the problem is all these aftershocks are anywhere from 7 kilometers to 5 to 2.8. I mean, they're just very shallow. So the earth is really shaken over there in Soda Springs, Idaho. Their ground is moving under their feet. And this supervolcano, first of all, Yellowstone National Park is only 136 miles from there. And the supervolcano, the main spot of it, is only 198 miles. So this area in Soda Springs, Idaho, it is part of, the supervolcano's underneath them, folks. It is the Yellowstone danger zone. Yes, it is. So which is more dangerous? The supervolcano that's rumbling and shaking, or Kim Jong-un, who's pushing the green button and caused a 6.3 earthquake. He also caused a couple aftershocks, one of which I believe was a 4.5, a 4.1 aftershock. So he caused that. So, we're talking about here, but North Korea did not cause the Yellowstone earthquake. Yellowstone earthquake happened before Kim Jong-un went boom, boom, boom in North Korea. And so it happened at Idaho, happened 3.5 hours ahead of Kim Jong-un. So they're not related. That was a false rumor on the internet. But certainly you got to ask yourself, which is more dangerous? Let's just throw in Hurricane Harvey and record flooding, 49 inches. Houston, we've got a problem, massive flooding. But wait, what do you want to do with Hurricane Irma? And then there's 2 more storms that are also forming and are looking dangerous. So you ask yourself a question. What should we focus our part? Somebody asked Nancy Pelosi, where is Nancy Pelosi right now? Maybe she thinks we should still go around taking down statues. Maybe we should be all in the streets protesting against free speech, or beating up that pastor at UC Berkeley for having a prayer meeting. Or maybe we should just spend all our time, the media should just wring their hands over stilettos, over high heels. Really, folks, let's get really real here. Can somebody get really real with me for a minute? Or maybe we should get concerned about your soul, where it's at. Where are you with God? And let's go back a minute. August 21st, total solar eclipse. And it's the first day of the 40 days of repentance of Elul. And we're not even through the 40 days. We can't even get to September 23rd yet. And we've got Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma, massive flooding in Nepal and India and Bangladesh with 1,200 people killed. Massive flooding now in China. And now we got Yellowstone. And then we got Kim Jong-un. So, guys, this has all been happening. And we're not even to September 23rd yet. Are you saved? Are you seriously considering what I'm telling you? What? You don't want to miss tonight's Sunday Night Live. Forget it. There's nothing else you should be doing. Because really, is it relevant? We're going to talk about all the current world events, how they relate to biblical prophecy. We're going to break down The Kim Jong-un threat. What is the possibilities? What does he, what possibilities does, look, we've been lied to by somebody. This man's got a lot of opportunity to cause some massive damage. And then what about Yellowstone? Are we being lied to about Yellowstone? I think so. I think so. It's the Yellowstone danger zone. It's for real. Are you? Supervolcano Yellowstone danger zone continues to be a very serious situation. Even the mainstream, lamestream, fake news media is beginning to realize they got to cover this. You can't go away. Look, since June the 15th, there's been 2,300 tremors, quakes, shakes. What? Things are breaking. And there's a lot of earthquakes going on, okay? We've had some serious earthquakes in the last 24 hours. I mean, at least a lot of activity. 38 quakes, okay? 38 quakes. It's just getting crazy. 4.9, Venezuela. 3.5, California. 6.3, Indonesia. 2.6, Kansas. 5.4, Alaska. 4.3, Colombia. 4.1, Afghanistan. 3.3, British Virgin Islands. 2.6, Dominican Republic. 4.9, New Papua New Guinea. 5.4, Indonesia. 4.8, the Central East Pacific Ridge. There was a 4.8 in China, a 4.7 in Peru, a 4.8 in Indonesia. A bunch of smaller quakes in the 2s and 3s. And there was a 5.3, Costa Rica. 4.7, Reykjavik Janes Ridge. Then a 4.7, 4.9, 5.7, very shallow, 4.8, 4.9. All of those in the Reykjavik Janes Ridge, which is right there in the Atlantic Ocean, way in the northern Atlantic, near Greenland up there. And this thing is shaking like mad, very shallow, less than 10 kilometers. I don't know about tsunamis, but, 5.7, now that was strong, and all of those aftershocks as well. So there's a whole lot of shaking going on. But let me tell you what's going on with the supervolcano in Yellowstone. This is huge. But on an ongoing earthquake swarm at Yellowstone volcanoes, now one of the biggest ever recorded. Over 2,300 tremors since June 15th. And here's what it is. As of August the 30th, there were 2,357 earthquakes at Yellowstone at the supervolcano. What? That's why we're concerned. Recently, we had a 3.3 there on August the 21st, the day of the total solar eclipse. And also, there was a powerful earthquake that started it all off on a 4.4 that hit there back on June 15th. So it's been an unbelievable swarm. Jamie Farrell, a research professor at the University of Utah, which is involved in the monitoring of the seismic activity in Yellowstone, told Newsweek magazine that the swarm was nothing out of the ordinary. Are you serious? But he said, and it has slowed down some. Really? It's a record, Jamie. It's a record. 2,300 plus quakes since June 15th in 2.5 months. It's an absolute record. It's not slowing down. Every day I'm watching these. I'm probably watching closer than Jamie Farrell is, the research professor at the University of Utah. Don't tell people it's slowing down when it's not, when it's breaking records. What is it they're hiding? What are they trying to do? What's going on here? Yellowstone! Yellowstone! You're about ready to blow!
Supervolcano blast would blanket the United States in ash. ScienceNews.org. And I'm going to share with you the levels in just a moment. Also, check this out. This took me a few minutes to find. I just had to know where to look. Archives from the defense.gov. And this is a specific meeting that was put together where they talked about actually, well, let me read this to you directly. Well, it points out the nature of the threat. It turned out to be a false threat under the circumstances. But as we have learned in the intelligence community, we have something called, and we have James Woolsey here to perhaps even address this question about phantom moles. The mere fear that there is a mole within an agency can set off a chain reaction and a hunt for that particular mole, which can paralyze the agency for weeks and months and years even. In a search, now, the same thing is true about just the false scare of a threat using some kind of a chemical weapon or a biological one. This is where it gets interesting. There are some reports, for example, that some countries have been trying to construct something like an Ebola virus, and that would be a very dangerous phenomenon, to say the least. Alvin Toffler has written about this in terms of some scientists in their laboratories trying to devise certain types of pathogens that would be ethnic specific so that they could just eliminate certain ethnic groups and races. And others are designing some sort of engineering, some sort of insects that can destroy specific crops. Others are engaging even in an eco-type terrorism, whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. So there's plenty of ingenious minds out there that are at work finding ways in which they can wreak terror upon other nations. It's real, and that's the reason why we have to intensify our efforts, and that's why this is so important. So this is directly from the DoD. You can read about this, U.S. Department of Defense. This is the news transcript. It is the news briefing, Secretary of Defense William Cohen, April 28, 1997 at 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time. This is Cohen's keynote address to the Conference on Terrorism, Weapons of Mass Destruction, and U.S. Strategy at the Georgia Center, Mahler Auditorium, University of Georgia, Athens, Georgia. Wow. Now, this right here, will you just look at it? Doesn't this look interesting? Well, as of thickness, this is the millimeter measurements here. So if you're seeing the yellow, that's 1 to 3 millimeters. Orange, 3 to 10. Well, that's like a yellowish orange. Orange, 10 to 30. So that means you're going to be anywhere from a ½ inch almost to a little bit over an inch. Now, here's where it's interesting, because if you look at the central point around Casper, Billings, the belly of the beast right there, you're talking like 40, 50 inches worth of ash. And many predictions have even more than that. This is somewhat of a mellow version. I mean, the entire U.S. literally just gets blanketed in ash. Now, if ash mixes with rain, then it's going to get real ugly. Now, 2,300 tremors. This is at Newsweek or Yahoo. An ongoing earthquake swarm at Yellowstone volcano is now one of the biggest ever recorded, with over 23 tremors since it began in June. As of August 30th, 2,357 earthquakes have been recorded. The most powerful in recent weeks was the magnitude 3.3. It took place on August 21st. There was a 4.4, which was recorded on June 15th. Read all about it. Hannah Osborne, Newsweek, or Yahoo.com. I was going to say Yellowstone. Here is the volcanoes.usgs.gov you can look at. This is just the past month, the past 31 days. So 1,023 earthquakes in the region in 30 days. Now you times that by 12, you're over 12,000. Actually about 13,260 approximately. If you look at it over 90 days, they're at 2,300. Well, 1,023. Somebody called me a shill because I said the number 33, so I guess I am a shill because I said the number 33 earlier.
Monkey mind not compute more very well.
This is interesting. The volcanic ash and winter rain can make a dangerous mix. So this is showing the heavy blanket of volcanic ash that spread over the Andean landscape of southern Chile and Argentina. You can see right there. We just look at it. Look at all that love. If you want to read more about this Space Preservation Act of 2001, This talks about some of these scholar weapons, etc. HR 2977. But wow, this is a crazy article right here. And you know what? Anybody that has done the research on bioweaponry, etc., done just a little bit of research, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out. The fact that they're talking about it, I find fascinating.
I'm Jake Lowenstern of the U.S. Geological Survey, and I'm scientist in charge of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory. Today we're going to talk about the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, what it does, who makes it up, and what we do, what are the monitoring techniques that we use to look at volcanic activity at Yellowstone. The Yellowstone Volcano Observatory is a virtual observatory. There is no building. We're a partnership of 3 different organizations. There's the USGS, my organization, which runs the volcano observatories. Then there's the University of Utah, and they run the seismic and ground deformation networks and are doing the geophysics involved with volcano monitoring. And finally, we have the land manager, Yellowstone National Park, and their group of scientists who are out looking at the hydrothermal activity and the other geological activity at Yellowstone. The main systems that we used for monitoring at Yellowstone are the seismic and the GPS ground deformation systems. The seismic system is about 27 different seismic stations. They are spread out all over Yellowstone, and they allow us to look at the size of earthquakes, the timing of earthquakes, and the magnitude, how big they are, how much energy they release. Beyond that, we have GPS stations, and the GPS stations are on very fixed monuments that are put into the ground, and they're averaging their location over many, many days and are taking data constantly. And that allows us to get very precise locations and to see how any spot on the ground is moving over time. And as with the result of having this technique, we can see that the ground at Yellowstone, for example, in this area right here, has moved about 20 centimeters or something around 12 inches upwards over the last 4.5 years. We have 2 primary methods of looking at ground deformation. One, we've already talked about, uses satellites and the GPS system. And there we can look at one point in space or one point on the ground and see how it moves over time. We have another technique that allows us to look at all of the ground surface at the same time, and that's called INSAR, or interferometric synthetic aperture radar. In this case, you get 2 radar images that are taken maybe a year apart. And you can't see what happened over that year, but you can see the amount of movement everywhere within the park over that 1-year time shift. We do look at the geysers as well in some locations, but we don't have the data in real time. Instead, we have data loggers which show the temperature of different stream outlets and geyser outflows and pool temperatures, and we can go collect that data and put it in an archive and look at the changes in the temperature of different features over time. Another thing that we have is the park has contracted with various different university groups to fly over Yellowstone and take thermal images of the park. And what they're trying to do with those thermal images is look at how the park changes over time and see if some of the thermal areas are shrinking and other ones are growing. Ever since people started coming to Yellowstone, there have been lots of earthquakes. And ever since we started putting up a seismic network, we've seen that there's swarms. Sometimes there's a swarm every few months somewhere in the park. The biggest one that we know of was in 1985. There's been smaller ones since then. Also, we know that there's been the ground moving up and down over time. Between the 1920s and the 1970s, there was a shift in Yellowstone Lake, and that caused areas in the south to be drowned. And there was about 80 centimeters of upward movement of the caldera floor up in this region. And so we know that there's been this kind of activity. When people have looked at lake levels in the past, they've seen over the past 10,000 years there's even bigger uplifts and downwarps that have been occurring at Yellowstone. So this clearly is the kind of activity that is always happening at Yellowstone. You go around calderas and other places in the world, and we can even find more extreme examples of ground deformation of swarms, also without any volcanic activity. So in general, anytime we see a swarm or we see a bit of ground deformation, we don't necessarily think that this is indicating a volcanic eruption. There's a lot of things that go on at Yellowstone. It's an active place. That's what makes it so special. We don't necessarily tie every single anomalous bit of activity into a volcanic eruption. So YVO includes a couple different people working from the U.S. Geological Survey, a couple people working at Yellowstone National Park, and a group of people working at the University of Utah on the geophysical data, the seismic and GPS data. In general, it's a relatively small operation because there's a lot of volcanoes in the United States. We have well over 100 that have erupted in the last 10,000 years. And so there's a lot of activity to watch. In Alaska, there are about 80 different volcanoes, and probably about a quarter of them have erupted in the last 50 to 100 years. So there's a lot that we need to look out for. Yellowstone is an important part of the volcano program, but it's not the only part. And so we also need to make sure that we have people out looking at the Cascades volcanoes in Washington, Oregon, and California, at the Long Valley Observatory, also in California, and then in Alaska and Hawaii. If you go to our website, which is volcanoes.usgs.gov/YVO, you'll see that we put out a monthly update, and that update summarizes everything that we've seen in terms of the ground deformation, in terms of earthquakes over that monthly period. Anytime anything else happens, there might be a hydrothermal explosion, there's a swarm of earthquakes, there's maybe faster ground motion, we'll put out an information release. And that information release will also get put right there on the front page of our website, and will provide information on what's happening right now. That all goes into an archive, so you can look back at the last 6 months or 9 months or eventually many, many years of information releases and monthly updates, and get a view of what's been happening at Yellowstone over time.
Including a 4.1, a 4.2, a 4.3, and we just had another one, a 4.5, and that one was strong, okay? And the problem is all these aftershocks are anywhere from 7 kilometers to 5 to 2.8. I mean, they're just very shallow. So the earth is really shaken over there in Soda Springs, Idaho. Their ground is moving under their feet. And this super volcano, first of all, Yellowstone National Park's own 5.3 earthquake hit last night in Soda Springs, Idaho. 5.3, very shallow. It was only 9.2 kilometers. But folks, since it happened last night, there has been an unbelievable situation develop. 54 aftershocks that are at least 2.5 or higher. Now, there's a bunch of them even lower than that. But let's just go with the ones 2.5 or higher on the U.S. Geological Survey. 54 of them, 3.5 hours ahead of Kim Jong-un. So they're not related. That was a false rumor on the internet. But certainly you got to ask yourself, which is more dangerous? Let's just throw in Hurricane Harvey and record flooding, 49 inches. Houston, we've got a problem, massive flooding. But wait, what do you want to do with Hurricane Irma? And then there's 2 more storms that are also forming and are looking dangerous. 0.3 earthquake. He also caused a couple aftershocks, one of which I believe was a 4.5. Let's see, a 4.1 aftershock. So he caused that. So, I mean, we're talking about here, but North Korea did not cause the Yellowstone earthquake. Yellowstone earthquake happened before Kim Jong-un went boom, boom, boom in North Korea. And so it happened at Idaho, happened 136 miles from there. And the supervolcano, the main spot of it, is only 198 miles. So this area in Soda Springs, Idaho, it is part of, the supervolcano's underneath them, folks. It is the Yellowstone danger zone. Yes, it is. So which is more dangerous? the supervolcano that's rumbling and shaking, or Kim Jong-un, who's pushing the green button and caused a 6